What if I told you that the secret to ending your anxiety isn't found in another productivity hack, another self-help book, or another meditation app, but in an ancient way of thinking that monks have been practicing for thousands of years? A way of thinking so powerful that it can transform your relationship with stress, worry, and fear in a matter of weeks. Stay with me because in the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the exact mental frameworks that monks use to maintain inner peace in a chaotic world, and more importantly, how you can apply these same principles to finally break free from the grip of anxiety that's been holding you back from living the life you truly deserve. This isn't about becoming a monk or giving up your worldly possessions. This is about adopting a mindset that will change everything about how you experience life, starting right now. Let me start by sharing something that might surprise you. Anxiety isn't actually your enemy. In fact, the first principle of thinking like a monk is understanding that anxiety is simply a signal, a messenger trying to tell you something important about your inner world. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fight anxiety, suppress it, or run away from it, but monks approach it completely differently. They see anxiety as a teacher, a guide that points toward the areas of life where we've lost alignment with our true nature. When you understand this fundamental shift in perspective, everything changes. You stop being at war with yourself and start becoming curious about what your anxiety is trying to communicate. Monks have known for centuries that resistance creates suffering and acceptance creates freedom. This doesn't mean accepting a life of anxiety. It means accepting the present moment exactly as it is, which, paradoxically, is the first step toward transforming it. Now let's talk about the monkey mind, because this concept is absolutely crucial to understanding why you feel anxious in the first place. Monks describe the untrained mind as a monkey swinging wildly from branch to branch, thought to thought, worry to worry, never settling, never at peace. Your mind generates somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And for most people, the majority of these thoughts are repetitive, negative, and anxiety-inducing. The monk's approach to this isn't to stop thinking altogether. That's impossible and not even desirable, but to become the observer of your thoughts rather than being controlled by them. This is where the real transformation begins. When you can watch your anxious thoughts like clouds passing through the sky, without grabbing onto them, without believing every story they tell you, without identifying with them as who you are, you've just taken the first massive step toward thinking like a monk. Let me give you a practical example of how this works in real life. Imagine you're lying in bed at night, and your mind starts racing with worries about tomorrow. You have a presentation at work, bills to pay, relationships that need attention, health concerns. The list goes on. The typical response is to engage with these thoughts, to try to solve every problem right there in bed, to play out every worst-case scenario, to mentally rehearse every possible disaster. This is the monkey mind in full swing, and it's exhausting. A monk would approach this situation completely differently. They would notice the thoughts arising, they would acknowledge them without judgment, and they would gently redirect their attention to their breath, to the present moment, to the sensation of their body resting on the bed. They wouldn't fight the thoughts, wouldn't tell themselves they shouldn't be thinking these things, wouldn't add a layer of anxiety about being anxious. They would simply observe, breathe, and return to the now again and again with infinite patience and compassion for themselves. This brings us to one of the most powerful principles of monastic thinking, the practice of detachment. Now, when I say detachment, I don't mean becoming cold, uncaring, or disconnected from life. I mean developing the ability to engage fully with life, while not being emotionally destroyed by its ups and downs. Monks understand that suffering comes from attachment, from clinging to outcomes, from demanding that life unfold according to our preferences and expectations. When you're anxious, you're essentially arguing with reality. You're saying that things should be different than they are, that you should be different than you are, that the future should unfold in a specific way, or else catastrophe will strike. This mental resistance to what is creates a constant state of tension in your nervous system. Monks train themselves to hold their desires, goals, and preferences lightly, to work toward what they want, while remaining emotionally flexible about how things turn out. This doesn't mean giving up or not caring. It means caring deeply, while also maintaining your inner peace regardless of external circumstances. Let's go deeper into why this matters for your anxiety. Most anxiety is rooted in the gap between your expectations and reality. You expect your life to look a certain way. You expect yourself to perform at a certain level. You expect others to behave in specific ways. And when reality doesn't match these expectations, anxiety floods in. Monks close this gap not by controlling reality, which is impossible, but by becoming more flexible in their relationship with their expectations. They practice what's called equanimity, which is the ability to remain balanced and centered whether things are going well or falling apart. Imagine having a mind so stable that success doesn't make you arrogant and failure doesn't make you depressed. Imagine being so grounded in your inner peace that criticism rolls off you like water off a duck's back, and praise doesn't inflate your ego. This is what thinking like a monk can give you, and it's the ultimate antidote to anxiety. Now, I need to address something important because I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be saying, "This sounds great in theory, but I live in the real world. I have bills to pay, deadlines to meet, relationships to maintain, and real problems to solve. I can't just detach from everything and sit in peaceful meditation all day." And you're absolutely right. This is where the true genius of monastic wisdom reveals itself, because monks aren't teaching you to escape from life. They're teaching you how to engage with life more effectively by changing your internal state. When you're anxious, your decision-making suffers, your relationships suffer, your health suffers, your performance suffers. Anxiety doesn't help you solve problems. It makes you worse at solving problems. By adopting a monk's mindset, you actually become more effective in the world, not less. You make better decisions because you're not operating from fear. You build better relationships because you're not projecting your inner turmoil onto others. You perform better because you're not paralyzed by worry about outcomes. Let me share with you one of the most transformative practices that monks use to rewire their relationship with anxiety, and it's something you can start doing today. It's called mental noting, and it's deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. Whenever an anxious thought arises, instead of getting swept away by it, you simply note it. You might say to yourself, worrying or future thinking or catastrophizing or simply thinking. This tiny act of labeling creates a gap between you and your thoughts. It reminds you that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts. This practice alone, done consistently, can dramatically reduce your anxiety levels because it breaks the automatic pattern of identification with your mental content. Most people are so fused with their thoughts that they can't tell the difference between thinking and reality. A monk knows that a thought is just a thought, not a fact, not the truth, not a prediction of the future, just a mental event that arises and passes away like everything else. Another crucial aspect of thinking like a monk is understanding the power of purpose and meaning. Monks dedicate their lives to something larger than themselves, whether that's spiritual awakening, service to others, or the pursuit of wisdom. This gives their lives a sense of direction and significance that acts as a buffer against anxiety. When you know your why, when you're connected to a deeper sense of purpose, the daily stresses and worries don't hit you as hard because you're anchored in something more substantial. Much of modern anxiety comes from living on autopilot, chasing goals that society told you to chase, filling your days with activities that don't truly matter to you, and then wondering why you feel empty, stressed, and anxious despite all your achievements. Monks would tell you to get clear on your values, to define what truly matters to you, and to align your daily actions with those values. This alignment creates a sense of integrity and wholeness that naturally reduces anxiety because you're no longer at war with yourself, no longer living a divided life. Let's talk about something that's absolutely fundamental to the monk's approach to anxiety, and that's the relationship with the body. Western culture tends to treat the mind and body as separate entities, but monks understand that they're intimately connected. Your anxiety isn't just in your head, it's in your chest, your stomach, your shoulders, your jaw. It's stored in your tissues and expressed through your physiology. Monks use their bodies as anchors to the present moment and as tools for releasing anxiety. Through practices like mindful breathing, gentle movement, and body scans, they learn to discharge the accumulated tension and stress that would otherwise manifest as chronic anxiety. When you're feeling anxious, your breath becomes shallow and rapid, which signals to your nervous system that you're in danger. which creates more anxiety, which makes your breathing worse, creating a vicious cycle. Monks break this cycle by consciously regulating their breath. Deep, slow diaphragmatic breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, telling your body that you're safe, which naturally calms your mind. This isn't just spiritual woo-woo, this is neuroscience. Your breath is the remote control for your nervous system, and monks have known this for thousands of years. Here's something else that monks understand about anxiety that most people miss completely. Anxiety thrives in isolation, both physical and mental isolation. When you're alone with your anxious thoughts, they multiply and intensify. When you keep your worries secret, they grow in the darkness of your mind. Monks live in community. They share their struggles. They confess their fears. They support each other through difficult times. Even though they may spend hours in solitary meditation, they're part of something larger than themselves. In our modern world, we've become increasingly isolated, despite being more connected than ever through technology. This isolation feeds anxiety. One of the most monk-like things you can do is to cultivate genuine connection with others, to be vulnerable about your struggles, to ask for help when you need it, and to offer support to others who are suffering. There's something deeply healing about realizing that you're not alone in your anxiety, that others struggle with similar fears and worries, that your experience is part of the shared human condition rather than evidence of your personal inadequacy. Now let's address one of the most challenging aspects of anxiety, and that's the fear of the future. Most anxiety is about things that haven't happened yet, and probably never will. Your mind creates elaborate scenarios of potential disaster, and then responds to these imaginary threats as if they were real. Monks practice what's called present moment awareness, which means bringing your full attention to what's happening right now, not what might happen tomorrow or next week or next year. This isn't about being irresponsible or failing to plan for the future. It's about recognizing that the only moment you actually have is this one. The future exists only in your imagination, and when you're living in an imaginary future, you're missing the real life that's happening right now. Monks would ask you, are you okay right now, in this exact moment? Not in 5 minutes, not tomorrow, but right now. Usually the answer is yes. Right now you're breathing, you're alive, you're okay. It's your thoughts about the future that create the anxiety, not the present moment itself. By training yourself to return to the present again and again, you starve anxiety of the fuel it needs to burn. Let me share with you a profound insight that monks have about the nature of the self, because this is where some of the deepest transformation happens. Much of your anxiety comes from defending and maintaining an image of yourself, a self-concept that you've built up over years. You worry about what others think of you, whether you're good enough, smart enough, successful enough, attractive enough. You're constantly comparing yourself to others and finding yourself lacking. You're terrified of failure because you think it means something about your worth as a person. Monks work to see through this illusion of the separate, solid self. They recognize that this self-image is just another mental construct, another story you're telling yourself. When you stop identifying so strongly with your self-image, when you stop taking yourself so seriously, a tremendous burden lifts. You become free to make mistakes, to be imperfect, to fail without it meaning that you are a failure. This doesn't mean you stop caring about your character or your impact on the world. It means you stop being so anxious about maintaining a perfect image and instead focus on being authentic and growing as a person. Another powerful principle from monastic wisdom is the practice of gratitude, but not the superficial kind where you just list things you're thankful for. I'm talking about a deep, embodied sense of appreciation for the miracle of existence itself. Anxiety focuses your attention on what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong, what you don't have. It's like wearing glasses that only let you see problems and threats. Monks train themselves to shift their attention to what's right, what's working, what's beautiful, what they do have. This isn't about denying reality or pretending that problems don't exist. It's about balancing your perception so you're not only seeing the negative. When you cultivate genuine gratitude, your brain literally changes. You start noticing more things to be grateful for, which creates positive emotions, which counteract anxiety. It becomes a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one. Start each day by bringing to mind 3 specific things you're grateful for, not just the big things like health and family, but the small things, the warm water in your shower, the coffee you're drinking, the fact that your heart is beating without you having to think about it. This simple practice, done consistently, can significantly reduce anxiety levels over time. Let's talk about acceptance, because this is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in all of anxiety management. When monks talk about acceptance, they're not talking about resignation or giving up or tolerating abuse or settling for a life you do not want. They're talking about accepting reality as it is right now in this moment, as the starting point for any change you want to make. You cannot change what you don't first accept. When you're fighting with reality, denying how things are, insisting that your anxiety shouldn't be there, you're creating additional suffering on top of the original discomfort. It's like having a thorn in your foot and then being angry that you have a thorn in your foot. The anger doesn't help, it just makes the experience worse. Acceptance means acknowledging what is. I'm feeling anxious right now, this is what's present. From that place of acceptance, you can then take skillful action. You can breathe, you can move, you can reach out for support, you can question your thoughts. But if you're stuck in resistance, if you're telling yourself you shouldn't feel this way, if you're judging yourself for being anxious, you're trapped. Acceptance is the key that unlocks the door to freedom, and it's one of the most fundamental aspects of thinking like a monk. Here's something crucial that monks understand about anxiety that can change everything for you. Anxiety isn't just caused by external circumstances or random brain chemistry, although those factors can play a role. Much of your anxiety is self-generated through the way you think, the stories you tell yourself, the meaning you assign to events. 2 people can experience the exact same situation, and one feels anxious while the other feels calm. The difference isn't the situation, it's how they're interpreting and relating to the situation. Monks train themselves to question their interpretations, to recognize that their first thought about something isn't necessarily the truth. When something triggers your anxiety, ask yourself, what am I telling myself about this situation? What meaning am I assigning to it? Is this interpretation definitely true? Or could there be other ways of seeing this? This practice of cognitive flexibility, of loosening your grip on your interpretations, can dramatically reduce anxiety because you realize that you have more choice in how you respond to life than you thought you did. Now I want to address something that many people struggle with, and that's the relationship between action and anxiety. Many people think that if they're not anxious, they won't be motivated to take action, that anxiety is somehow useful or necessary for getting things done. Monks would tell you that this is completely backwards. Anxiety doesn't motivate effective action. It motivates frantic, scattered, reactive behavior. When you're anxious, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and planning, goes offline, and your amygdala, your fear center, takes over. You make poor decisions, you miss important details, you operate from scarcity and fear rather than clarity and purpose. The monk's approach is to cultivate calm, focused awareness and then take action from that place of centeredness. This actually makes you more effective, not less. You see more clearly, you think more creatively, you respond more skillfully. You can still have a sense of urgency and commitment without the overlay of anxiety. In fact, you can accomplish more with less stress when you're operating from a place of inner peace rather than inner turmoil. Let me share with you one of the most transformative realizations you can have about anxiety. And it's this: anxiety is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Every wave of anxiety is an opportunity to practice the principles we've been discussing. Every anxious moment is a chance to observe your thoughts, to return to your breath, to practice acceptance, to question your interpretations, to connect with the present moment. Instead of seeing anxiety as a problem to be eliminated, monks would see it as a teacher that's showing you where you're still attached, where you're still resisting, where you're still believing thoughts that aren't serving you. This shift in perspective, from seeing anxiety as the enemy to seeing it as a messenger and a teacher, is incredibly liberating. You stop being a victim of your anxiety and start being a student of it. You become curious rather than terrified. You ask, what can I learn from this? What is this showing me about my mind? How can I practice my monk-like thinking right now in this moment? Another essential aspect of thinking like a monk is simplicity. Monks live simply, not because they can't afford more, but because they understand that complexity breeds anxiety. Every possession you own requires mental energy to maintain. Every commitment on your calendar creates a sense of obligation. Every option you have to choose between creates decision fatigue. Modern life bombards you with endless choices, endless information, endless stimulation, and your nervous system wasn't designed to handle this level of input. Anxiety is often the result of having too much going on, too many demands on your attention, too many balls in the air. Monks would encourage you to simplify ruthlessly, to identify what truly matters to you and let go of everything else. This might mean decluttering your physical space, saying no to commitments that don't align with your values, limiting your consumption of news and social media, creating more space in your calendar for rest and reflection. Simplicity isn't about deprivation. It's about creating room for what matters most, and in that spaciousness, anxiety naturally decreases because you're not constantly overwhelmed. Let's talk about self-compassion, because this might be the most important thing you need to hear if you struggle with anxiety. Monks are incredibly kind to themselves, not in a self-indulgent way, but in a way that recognizes their shared humanity and their inherent worth regardless of their achievements or failures. Most people with anxiety are incredibly harsh on themselves. They have a brutal inner critic that constantly tells them they're not good enough, that they should be doing better, that they're weak for feeling anxious. This self-criticism doesn't help. It makes everything worse. It adds a layer of suffering on top of the original anxiety. Monks practice self-compassion, which means treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a good friend who was struggling. When you notice anxiety arising, instead of judging yourself or getting frustrated, try saying to yourself, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need." This might feel awkward at first, especially if you're used to beating yourself up. But over time, this practice can fundamentally transform your relationship with anxiety. Here's a profound insight from monastic traditions that can help you understand why anxiety persists, even when you're doing all the right things. Anxiety often has roots in unprocessed emotion and unresolved trauma from your past. Monks understand that the mind isn't just in your head, it's in your whole body, and your body keeps the score of every experience you've had. Sometimes your anxiety isn't really about the presentation you have to give tomorrow. It's your body remembering every time you felt unsafe or judged as a child. It's old fear surfacing in a new context. This doesn't mean you need to spend years in therapy, unpacking every childhood experience, although therapy can be incredibly helpful. It means approaching your anxiety with curiosity and compassion, recognizing that it might be trying to protect you based on old information that's no longer relevant. Monks create space for these old emotions to surface and be released through their contemplative practices. They don't suppress or bypass difficult feelings. They allow them to be there, to be felt, to move through, and eventually dissolve. As we come toward the end of our exploration of monk-like thinking, I want to emphasize that this isn't about perfection. Monks don't have perfect minds that never experience anxiety or difficult emotions. What they have is a different relationship with these experiences. They've trained themselves not to be controlled by their mental states, to remain centered even when storms arise, to return to peace again and again, no matter how many times they get pulled into turmoil. This is a practice, not a destination. You're going to have anxious moments for the rest of your life. That's part of being human. But you can dramatically change how much you suffer from those moments and how quickly you return to your center. Every time you notice anxiety and choose to respond like a monk, returning to your breath, observing your thoughts, practicing acceptance, questioning your interpretations, you're strengthening new neural pathways in your brain. You're training your nervous system to be more resilient. You're becoming the kind of person who can maintain their inner peace regardless of external circumstances. And that is true freedom. The path to thinking like a monk and finally ending anxiety isn't about adding more techniques or practices to your already busy life. It's about fundamentally shifting how you relate to your experience. It's about moving from resistance to acceptance, from identification to observation, from being controlled by your thoughts to being aware of them, from living in the imaginary future to being present in the real now, from harsh self-judgment to kind self-compassion. These shifts happen gradually, through consistent practice, through patient repetition, through gentle persistence. There will be days when you feel like you're making no progress, when the anxiety feels just as strong as ever, when you forget everything you've learned and get completely swept away by worry. That's okay. That's part of the process. The monk's approach isn't to never fall down, it's to get back up every time you fall with compassion and without judgment, and to keep practicing, keep returning, keep choosing peace over and over again. Your anxiety has been trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe, trying to help you prepare for threats and avoid danger. Thank it for its efforts, acknowledge its good intentions, and then gently let it know that you've got this, that you're capable of handling whatever comes, that you don't need to live in constant fear of the future. The monk within you, that wise, peaceful, unshakable presence, has always been there beneath the anxiety, beneath the worry, beneath the fear. You're not creating something new, you're uncovering what's always been true, that at your core, beyond all the mental noise and emotional turbulence, you are already whole, already okay, already free. The practices and principles we've explored are simply ways of removing the obstacles that have been blocking you from experiencing this truth. As you continue on this journey, remember that every moment is a fresh start, every breath is a new beginning, every instance of noticing your anxiety is an opportunity to practice thinking like a monk. And in that practice, in that patient, persistent, compassionate effort, you will find the peace you've been seeking. You